Performance-based contracts can be used in a really highly regulated solicitation environment, such as a state or local municipality, state government or local municipality, and it comes from a lot of research that we understand that the federal government has done around performance outcome and even value-based types of arrangements. So I adopted my children out of foster care, so I'll use this example, okay? So when my children were placed with me, they were foster to adopt. So I was their foster mother first and then identified as their adoptive parent. But in that foster system, the mother was still allowed visitations when she was able to physically be present. We'll just leave it at that if any of you work for the Department of Health and Human Services. And so there are subcontractors that provide those visitation services, right? And so these lovely women work for mostly, and some men, but mostly women work for these smaller agencies that are within the municipalities, right? Even though it's a statewide initiative. So that's a contract, and we want it to be a performance-based contract because we need people to deliver the service again and again, that every Saturday at 8 a.m., this woman would show up, Shannon, to pick up my children, to drive them to where the location was to meet the mom, to then provide safety. And trust me, we do not pay these people enough because my daughter's little brother, who was adopted into a different home, actually went headlong into a pool because the mother wasn't watching. So just don't even get me started on how valuable these services are to the community, right? And so then they bring my children back home. You know, I'm a middle-class mom. They're my children. Whether the state has signed the paperwork or not, they're my children, right? And so that's a kind of a performance-based contract where you would want the agency that's performing these kinds of services under a contract to whatever your equivalent of Department of Health and Human Services to be able to provide all the certifications, to be able to provide consistent service, showing up on time. And you would want to know immediately, if there was a loss of certification, if a woman had been arrested or accused of harming someone. You would want to know these things because this is all part of risk, and this is part of the performance that we're talking about in performance-based contracts, okay? And so the goal is very much around risk mitigation and trying to avoid loss to the state and to the agency by monitoring what those performance goals are: on time, right place, right amount, etc. Does anyone have an idea of a performance-based contract? An example where you've built into a performance work statement or a statement of work where there's a performance element and a metric, something that you're always measuring to avoid a risk event and a subsequent loss. I bet you have, and you just don't even realize the ways in which we've included metrics into a contract where there is something that needs to be delivered, whether it's a good or a service, that it needs to be delivered in a safe way repeatedly. And you're measuring to make sure that that service or that good is delivered safely and repeatedly. That would be part of a performance-based contract. But the idea being is that we want to try to encourage enough of a counter incentive for poor performance that people are incented to, in fact, perform. And then in the far reaches, which we'll talk about very briefly, you can actually incentivize for performance. And the federal government does it. It's something that isn't done very often in government, but it can be done. And people don't realize that it can be done. And so I went to the National Contract Management Association to talk at their World Congress about 2, maybe 3 summers ago on FAR 48, which we'll talk about briefly, and incentive-based contracting, value-based contracting. And the 2 people who were familiar out of the 110 or so in the room were the prime contractors, not the contract procurement officials for the various federal departments. So this is something that we really do need to start to embrace because the rules and procedures are there. We're just not aware of them. So I'm part evangelical teacher of performance-based contracting. The last sentence is the sentence that we most focus on in the contract, which is payment for the goods or service is contingent upon the services in the performance-based contracting actually being delivered to the standard that we want. When we do performance-based contracting, we do something that's called conditional acceptance. We don't accept the final good or the final service until it meets the expectation. But as you could imagine, if the AAGs are going to be reluctant to issue penalties if we haven't tracked what that performance is, in order to have good conditional acceptance, to be able to reject a service or a product because it doesn't meet standards, then we have to have those standards very clearly laid out at the point when it goes out for its very initial solicitation, so that those standards are clearly outlined to all of the bidders, so that they are clearly factored into the evaluation process, and then when it's awarded to the correct supplier who knows what those expectations and challenges might be.
Hello, I hope you learned a little something about applying performance-based contracting standards within a governmental procurement process. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Contract Professionals Playbook and the e-learning program. The Contract Professionals Playbook is available in a print version on Amazon, and we do have an e-learning program based on the Contract Professionals Playbook. The critical element that I'd like you to understand about this playbook is that it has 25 tools. Those are spreadsheets and/or checklists to help you apply and implement contracting best practices in your next contract. The book and the e-learning program are designed around 12 "How do I" questions. They are arranged within the contract lifecycle, pre-award, award, and post-award, as you can see here on this slide. Each week of the e-learning program addresses a critical question, and each of those questions are also answered in the printed version of the playbook. The 12-week learning program includes 4 parts: 12 targeted training videos and webinars that are pre-recorded for self-paced online learning, 12 chat sessions with the co-author and I, Lawrence Kane, 25 tools in a PDF version, and a copy of the Contract Professionals Playbook. The Contract Professionals Playbook is perfect for teams of 1 to 5 as an open enrollment or a public course, or you can do it as a private company team, ideally teams of 4 or 5 or more. And you can follow the link at www.jeanetteneiden.simplero.com for more information. I also offer customized contract negotiation and management skills programs, including pre and post skills assessment, in-person training sessions with case studies and role plays, and post-training coaching. I'm also a contract negotiator and mentor, where I sit as a credentialed advisor to co-lead complex negotiations from the development of the contract through to the management of the contract. Email me at jen@janeiden.com if you'd like to know more about these services.